Secret societies were not always crushed by armies. They were undone by paperwork. A lawyer's desk drawer hiding invisible ink. A prison yard where miners smelled a red rose. A businessman's safe holding nearly 1,000 names. One of those names belonged to a banker found hanging beneath a London bridge, and no court has settled who put him there. The Illuminati. October 1786. Landshut, Bavaria. Police enter the home of government lawyer Xavier von Zwack and begin searching his papers. 10 years earlier, Adam Weishaupt had founded the order in Ingolstadt as a small Enlightenment circle that wanted reason and secular education to outrun church control. Bavaria banned secret societies in 1784 and outlawed the Illuminati by name the following spring. The decisive turn came in October 1786, when investigators opened Xavier von Zwack's files and found internal correspondence, coded material, and instructions involving invisible ink. The documents gave the government evidence it could publish instead of rumors it had to chase. At its height, the order numbered only a few thousand members, and repression scattered it within years. The American image came later. Anyone who grew up handling $1 bills knows the eye above the pyramid. Yet that symbol belongs to the Great Seal of the United States, and no documentary chain ties it to Weishaupt's order. The historical Illuminati began in 1776 and effectively disappeared before the French Revolution reached its peak. A society blamed for directing centuries of events lasted barely a decade. The Hellfire Club. Beneath West Wacom Hill, chalk tunnels dug after harvest failures in the late 1740s became a meeting place for Francis Dashwood's circle, later remembered as the Hellfire Club. Dashwood created the Knights of St. Francis in 1745, and his taste for theatrical religion made easy material for scandal. His companions later used the caves for private gatherings, with John Wilkes and the Earl of Sandwich moving through the same political world. The public story changed in 1762, when Francis Dashwood became Chancellor of the Exchequer, and enemies had reason to publicize tales about his private life. Benjamin Franklin provides the useful American test case. He was Dashwood's friend, visited West Wickham, and later worked with him on an abridged prayer book. London gossip supplied black masses and devil worship, but surviving records do not establish Franklin as a participant in a satanic ceremony. That difference matters because the documented group was already strange enough without adding a ritual the evidence cannot place him inside. If Franklin entered a devil-worshipping gathering there, more than 2 centuries of surviving correspondence have still not produced the document that proves it. The Rosicrucian Mystery. Early in the 1600s, anonymous manifestos appeared in the German lands describing a hidden brotherhood of the Rosy Cross and its legendary founder, Christian Rosenkreuz. The texts promised a sweeping reform of religion, learning, and medicine, and readers across Europe tried to discover whether the fraternity existed. The paper trail shifted in 1616, when Johann Valentin Andrea published The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. Scholars generally accept Andrea as its author, and many attribute a role to him in the earlier manifestos, but authorship of the whole set remains debated. In his autobiography, Andrea identified an early version of The Chemical Wedding as his own, and called it a ludibrium, which is different from confessing that every Rosicrucian manifesto was a teenage prank. Thinkers including René Descartes were drawn into the wider Rosicrucian excitement, yet no verified representative of the original brotherhood emerged. A documented organization using the name appeared much later in England, when Robert Wentworth Little founded the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia in 1865. Roughly 250 years separate the first manifestos from that society. The unresolved question is smaller than the legend, but harder to dismiss. Were the original Rosicrucians a private circle behind the texts, or only an idea printed into existence? The Carbonari. How does a secret society associated with charcoal burners end up forcing a king to accept a constitution? In southern Italy during the early 1800s, Carbonari cells borrowed the language and tools of the charcoal trade for passwords, symbols, and meeting rituals. Their politics changed with the rulers around them, but resistance to restored absolutism became the common thread after Napoleon's fall. The balance broke in early 1821, when King Ferdinand I returned to Naples with an Austrian army of about 50,000 and crushed the constitutional movement that had begun the previous year. Arrests and exile followed, yet the network did not simply vanish. In 1831, Ciro Menotti helped organize another revolt in Modena and was captured and executed by Duke Francis IV. Giuseppe Mazzini, who had joined the Carbonari as a young man, soon built young Italy around a more explicit program of national unification. Schoolbooks make Italian unity look like a march toward one flag, but the Carbonari show the messier underground phase before that outcome. Their direct contribution to unification remains debated. The measurable contrast is the timeline. Austria marched in with 50,000 troops in 1821. 40 years later, a Kingdom of Italy existed. Propaganda due. Inside Licio Gelli's villa in Arezzo, police opened a safe on March 17, 1981, while investigating another financial case. They expected business records. Instead, they found a membership list for P2, a clandestine Masonic lodge, containing nearly 1,000 names from politics, the military, business, and the intelligence world. The story turned in June 1982, when banker Roberto Calvi was found hanging beneath Blackfriars Bridge in London after Banco Ambrosiano began collapsing. Calvi had ties to P2 and to Vatican finance. By then, the membership list had become a national scandal, and Italy had created a parliamentary commission to investigate the lodge. The first British inquest called Calvi's death suicide. A second inquest rejected that conclusion and returned an open verdict. In 2003, City of London police formally treated the case as a murder inquiry. No one has been convicted of killing Calvi. For viewers who remember the scandals of the early 1980s, the disturbing part is how ordinary the discovery looked at first. A police search, a safe, and a typed list. The list was real. The final question remains open. Who put Calvi under that bridge? The Molly Maguires. June 21, 1877, Schuylkill County Prison in Pottsville, Pennsylvania. 6 condemned miners are hanged there in pairs, while 4 more die the same day at Mock Chunk. James Boyle walks to the scaffold carrying a dark red rose and raises it to his face before the trap opens. The prosecution's foundation was already in place by 1875, when Pinkerton detective James McParland was reporting from inside the Molly Maguire investigation. Franklin Gowan, president of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, later took an official prosecutorial role in trials tied to the alleged society. 10 additional condemned men were executed over the next 2 years, bringing the total to 20. The legal record is real, but so is the conflict surrounding it. Private mining interests helped investigate the defendants, and Gowan participated in prosecuting them. That does not prove every accusation was fabricated, and historians still argue over where labor violence ended and an organized secret society began. If McParland had never entered the coal fields undercover, there is no way to know whether the same 20 men would still have reached the gallows. The missing Mason. William Morgan walks out of the jail at Canandaigua, New York, on the night of September 12, 1826, after another man pays the debt holding him there. Morgan is a Freemason who has threatened to publish the order's rituals, and a carriage is waiting outside. That night in 1826, witnesses place Mason Nicholas Cheesebro among the men taking Morgan away as Morgan cries for help. The carriage heads west toward Fort Niagara, and Morgan is never reliably seen again. A body recovered from Lake Ontario the following year briefly entered the political fight, but it did not settle the disappearance. Courts convicted several men for roles in the abduction, not for murder, because prosecutors could not prove what happened after Morgan vanished. The penalties were measured in months rather than decades. The public reaction dwarfed those sentences. By 1832, the anti-Masonic Party had nominated William Wirt for president, becoming the first American third party to hold a national nominating convention. One missing man helped turn suspicion of secret societies into a national political movement. 2 centuries later, the central fact is still missing. What happened to Morgan after that carriage left Canandaigua? The Knights Templar. By the early 1300s, the Knights Templar controlled castles, estates, and a financial network stretching across Europe and the Mediterranean. France's King Philip IV owed the order money and was also locked in a wider struggle over royal authority. The rupture came on October 13, 1307, when Philip ordered Templars arrested across France and accused them of heresy. Interrogations and coerced confessions followed, but the destruction took years rather than one dramatic Friday. Pope Clement V formally suppressed the Templars in 1312. 2 years later, in 1314, the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned in Paris with Geoffroy de Charnay. Later legend gave de Molay a curse against king and pope, although contemporary evidence for the famous speech is weak. The stronger story needs no curse. A transnational order that had existed for almost 2 centuries lost legal protection, property, and leadership through a campaign driven by royal and papal power. Philip's debts belong in the background, but historians do not reduce his motives to one unpaid bill. Friday the 13th survived as the memorable date. The institutional collapse took roughly 7 years. The Thule Society. Munich after the First World War was crowded with nationalist clubs, paramilitary groups, and political organizations competing for angry veterans and frightened middle-class supporters. The Thule Society belonged to that world, mixing Völkisch nationalism, anti-Semitism, Germanic mythology, and occult interests. The political bridge appeared in 1919, when Thule member Karl Harrer joined Anton Drexler in founding the German Workers' Party. Adolf Hitler attended a party meeting that September, joined soon afterward, and by 1921 had become the movement's dominant leader. Rudolf Hess had connections to the Thule milieu, while later claims have exaggerated the membership of other Nazi figures. Historian Nicholas Goodrich Clark found no evidence that Hitler ever attended a Thule Society meeting. That matters because popular books often turn a documented political network into a story about occultists creating Nazism by ritual. The real chain is less cinematic and more useful. A small radical party emerged from Munich's post-war extremist scene, then Hitler transformed it into a mass political movement. How much organizational help did that early network actually give a party that quickly outgrew it? Skull and Bones. Yale's Skull and Bones Society was founded in 1832, but its windowless meeting hall, the Tomb, did not open until 1856. Each year, the society traditionally selected 15 students, and its closed rituals attracted campus rumors almost immediately. The secrecy cracked in 1876, when students calling themselves the Order of the File and Claw broke into the tomb and published a pamphlet titled "Babylon is Fallen." The national scale changed in 1908, when Bonesman William Howard Taft was elected president. George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush later followed the same path from the society to the White House. The 1876 inventory had included a dilapidated human skull in a basement toilet, not a chamber piled with human remains. But the stranger fact is the alumni concentration that followed. 3 American presidents came from a society adding only about 15 members per class. That concentration is documented, yet it does not establish a command structure directing national policy. The strongest evidence shows an unusually durable alumni network at an elite university, reinforced by secrecy and personal ties. If 15 new members a year were enough to run a superpower from the tomb, more than a century of scrutiny has still failed to produce the orders, minutes, or chain of command that would show how.